cut out if we have anything that we do that's stupid. I usually don't. I just leave in all the stupid stuff I do. Okay, so
That's the way. That is the way.
this is Ian on Suno IO. Also Ian because he works for Suno, so I think most people there know him
Sure.
pretty well. He's in Diskrot and put a few albums on the site, as well as just generally is very active in the community. And I've been meaning to interview Ian for ages. So anyway, let's go. Without further ado, generally where I start with is like what I'm really curious about. In your case, it's a little different because I'm actually super curious because I know you work in design, so I know you have some art background, obviously, considering what you're doing. But I'm curious to know what is your relationship with art, because you also seem to be do music as well, and how did that kind of start for you? Like, what's your story in terms of your sort of, I guess, artistic journey, if we want to call it that?
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think I've always been a little creative. Like I've always gravitated towards like creative things. Like I drew a lot as a kid. Um, in like middle school when they'd ask you what you want to be when you grow up, I'd always say like a comic book artist. But I definitely topped out on the skill there pretty early, and I've always liked music as well. Um, and so I guess like the creative journey of it is that like in high school I got like a bootleg copy of Photoshop and um, like many people my age, and basically just played around with it a lot, got like addicted to it, and was like, this is what I want to go to school for. I want to be a Photoshop major or whatever.
Yeah,
And fortunately, the major wasn't just Photoshop.
graphic
The thing I
design.
went to school for was called digital media, and it was like a mix of traditional graphic design, 2D and 3D animation, and web design, like stuff like that. And I obviously gravitated more towards the latter, like the sort of
Hmm.
graphic design, web design stuff. Um, Also, meanwhile, I've been in a band for a very long time. Started in like high school with some friends. We
Oh,
put out a
cool.
couple albums like on Spotify. We haven't released anything in like over a decade, but still really proud of those projects, and we still get together occasionally.
Wow.
But so I have that creative outlet as I'm going, and then jumping into that side in school and whatever. And eventually, without going through the history in excruciating detail,
Yeah.
got more into product design, product strategy. I think even though it's like a visual medium, I've never thought I'm super skilled from a visual perspective. I think I'm a better
Hmm.
like curator and more like kind of like thinker than I am like a sort of like artisan in that way.
Okay.
Um, and so I do like product design, which is less visual than like traditional graphic design or brand design or whatever. Still a lot of creativity in it, but yeah. And then music, like I said, just have been writing and singing for a really long time. And when I kind of found Suno, had just one of those moments where it's like when you like use Uber for the first time,
Right. Right.
and like a car actually shows up and you're like, oh my God, it worked. Like that's like
Yeah.
literal magic. Like this is crazy.
It's crazy
And I
that
was
there's a
fortunate
whole
enough.
generation that doesn't know like how, but distinctly remember this where it's
Yeah,
like,
how
wow,
revolutionary.
that only cost me $15, like, or like whatever, like
Yeah.
it was
Yeah, it just changes how you view the world in that moment
yeah, it
almost,
was fun.
and
But yeah, anyway,
um
so you got into Suno related specifically to you said product design was your
yes, yeah.
okay.
So yeah, that's like my professional background, and it worked out where my wife and I lived in San Francisco for a few years, but we're both from Massachusetts, and we had moved back during the pandemic, and then I became aware of Suno that is based in Massachusetts, and it worked out very serendipitously for me to chat with chat with them and
Hmm.
kind of get involved very early, and been there for a couple of years now, so it's been really fun.
Awesome. Okay, so so that pretty much covers pretty extensively your background. We've had a number of people. I don't know, not everyone's interviews. There's a lot of them we've done, but basically we have everything from just people who listen to a ton of music and were very, very interested in just basically a young guy from Brazil who just like got really into Suno because he loves like various. Actually, I don't even think he was super into dance music when he first got into Suno. He just massively expanded. But anyway, all the way to people like you, of course, who are doing. I mean, I would see any form of design, in essence, you're doing art for a living. So I consider that to be someone who is effectively an established artist. You have established artists like people who are
Sure.
producing art that they're selling themselves, like an artisan or whatever. But then you also have established artists who, work for the man. Like, no, I'm just, I mean, Suno's sort of the outsider, but you know what I mean. In the context, you're getting paid to produce something that is visually appealing, which shows a certain amount of craftsmanship. So I was really, what I'm interested in actually to hear is two different things. Number one is, someone like you who you had a background, specifically you had a band. I'm interested, when you came across Suno, did you have any sort of like issues with it at first? Like this, because this is becoming increasingly controversial, it seems like to me, and it's kind of interesting to see that as we get closer to like, I wouldn't even say closer to mass adoption. Mass adoption in many ways is already here, but what I mean is closer to capitulation. You see the fight sort of becoming more pitched. And so now I'm really curious to know, like, did you have like a sort of come to AI moment where you're like, oh, this is art, depending on what's going on with it, or was it always just like, yeah, I just care about, I'm just curious to know your perspective there, and if that's changed.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think something I will say for Suno that I really like and helped, convince me to join is that people really do like care about music there, right? Like not everyone is a musician, but there's a lot of passion for it, a lot of thoughtfulness with it. And I think that's really important for this type of innovation. And so I definitely had the moment, as I think most people do, where you have to have this reckoning where you're like, how do I actually feel about this? You know what I mean? I obviously netted out in the positive and feel even more that way today. But yeah, I think it's also different to kind of like wax philosophical about it and think about, like do the whole like change is scary kind of feeling versus actually getting your hands on it and viewing it as what it is, which is really a creative tool for creative people, not something to replace people or the human element or anything like that. And so I think, a moment for me with that was as I started creating and actually becoming like proud of what I was creating, you get a sense of like ownership and like, oh, I actually did contribute to this. Like this wouldn't exist the way it does without me in the equation. And so I think, at least on that vector, I think like very early on, I kind of started feeling that. I don't want to get too deep into that debate.
That's okay.
All my opinions are just my own and
yeah,
whatever.
No. I'm not.
Like I said, I obviously feel positive about it.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, look, even if I always just, this is obviously you work for Suno, so like you're not going to be like but like you work there, so like, look, if I worked at a burger place and I was like, I freaking hate meat, that's not an issue. The point is you do a good job, so I don't think that's relevant. But I understand the inclination. In any case, what I find, so it's interesting the way that you talk about it in the context of realizing sort of that you contributed. And I see like there's sort of a spectrum here from people like Bella who they see Suno or whatever AI tool you're using as sort of a collaborator, and then people like, I would say, I think Alex is in the same boat as me here where I see it as 100% a tool. It's just like a flute that has a almost intangible way that you play it. And in some ways it's more limited, in some ways it's far less limited than a traditional instrument. But it's just atypical. But in any case, so this sort of falls in the middle here. And what I find interesting with this sort of perspective is more specifically when we deal with stuff within, for example, diskrot, all the different creators here. One of the things that we do often, one of the earliest techniques that sort of got refined was just cover chaining. And cover chaining, whereas most people were using covers, the idea was like, oh, people are going to want to take other people's songs and make, it in a different genre. But ours was, you're going to take these songs and use them as audio conditioning to make something totally different and totally new. And one of the earliest things that I noticed, and this was a big contribution to One of my like albums that I personally am really proud of was the Accidental Birds one. Was so, and you're on that album as well. You were one of the contributors, so this is why it came to mind.
Yeah.
When you include other people, it's with there's no doubt especially once you're doing the work that people are contributing, because you notice the quality of what you're doing gets uplifted simply because their methods or their techniques or whatever intangible thing they're bringing to it, it could just be their ear, ends up basically just improving the net outcome. And you end up with music that's just like greatly more desirable, not just to the individual, but like broader, without it necessarily having to even be broad music. That was one of my favorite parts about this whole thing, is we were making some music that was like atypical. It wasn't like your typical pop, but it was broadly, that album in particular, when I had people, listen to certain tracks on there that were worked on by everybody, it's like really well liked. And I found that to be really fascinating. But, so it sort of vibes with what you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, and I think like you kind of alluded to, like I think my own perception of like what Suno is somewhere in between those two stances of like, is it a collaborator, is it a tool? And I think it's a bit of both. But like you're also saying, like the human element is so important, right? And I'm going to try to verbalize this in a way that makes some sense. But like I think my opinion of my own like art, my own music with Suno, has definitely evolved, and I feel more and more like a producer or like a curator, and obviously songwriter. But again, like coming from a background like doing analog music, I'm like playing live shows, I'm singing into a microphone. It's obviously a different feeling, but it's like it is also very creatively satisfying and gratifying, whatever. And I think like you're saying with Accidental Birds, and this is probably an area that Suno needs to do better at, is letting a lot of people in, right? Like that is a huge benefit of what you've done with diskrot, is like you're connecting people with different ideas, with different opinions. And I think one of the greatest assets that people have in this new era is taste. Like I think that is like a very important skill that gets like underplayed, like more than the hard skills of doing a lot of the stuff. It's ultimately your taste and how you can like sort of communicate a vision out, whatever. And so getting those opinions and those varying tastes all contributing to one thing just leads to better output, more interesting output, more varied output, right? And I think that's just a really cool aspect of the community that you're building. And I think some of the more innovative stuff that is coming out of like music and art creation in general has some of that to thank too, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, just the other day, one of the things, another thing that when you're talking about this, you're talking about taste being important. And I think that this is something that in diskrot it's just a given. That sort of like base bar metric, because what you're saying in another sense is that that the music matters. It's not just yes, if you're an artist you have to promote yourself, that's a given. Diskrot doesn't really focus on that. We focus on the taste aspect, meaning the idea is that how good can this get, and you have to have taste to do that. I'm curious to know, since you had a band, what are your thoughts? Like, has this always been like on the in terms of the like general music industry, etc. Like, do you feel that Suno is bringing like sort of a net positive there because it's giving this accessibility to more creators and leading this kind of stuff, or do you feel like it's sort of letting in like a lot of people are like the slop, and like I don't know, sort of like how do you feel about that, or is that something you don't want to talk about? Also, that's totally acceptable if it's.
No, I'll at least have.
I'm sending this to. I won't send it to
I'll
the
at least have talk about it. I think the part that excites me most about it is the former, where like I think it unlocks creativity for a lot of people that have just never been able to create or express in this way. And not that the music industry has like been like gate kept, but it is not the most accessible thing, right? It's been a
Right.
more of a one-way relationship. Like you're most likely a listener, right? Not a creator. And I think this breaks down that barrier a little bit and just opens it. And some of my favorite stories that we've heard in like user research and stuff is just people who are saying like, hey, I've had like a notebook full of poems and lyrics and whatever for like 10 years. I don't like my singing voice. I don't have any musical talent. I don't know friends that play instruments. There's no way that this thing exists
Right.
without this tool, Suno. And when people get unlocked by that, it's like it's very heartening to me, and I think it's like the like one of the best things that is contributing to the world is like letting more people express because again like as a creative person like that's just an impulse I've always had and have had to do like you have to get this out, have to get this idea out,
Yeah.
have to create XYZ. And not everybody has that, and I think this opens it to more people, and it's like one of the best feelings you can have as a human being, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. For
um
sure. I think
to be a little
it's
highfalutin about it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's look, this is one of the main things about even if you're not look, not everyone has a creative drive like you have. I'm familiar with the feeling where like you just I mean you would create on Suno, or if you didn't have Suno, you'd be creating anyway. No matter what, you're always going to be creating something. I can tell because you're constantly producing work. Meaning in your free time, you
Yeah.
must be doing this frequently. And I'm well, so this is but most people in their free time they're going to want to go do something totally different and whatever. But they're going to get to connect with their mom, or they're going to get to connect with a story that they have that they love, or a fandom, or whatever it is. Personally, I think those are all extremely valid uses of art. Folk art has been around for forever.
Yeah.
All kinds of art has, and so now it creates this new way for people to be able to access and express themselves together in all these different ways. Super useful. So totally, yeah, I
Yeah.
agree 100%. All right, now let's get down to brass tacks. This is sort of the second part of what I usually talk about, which is methods and like prompting
Mm.
stuff. So we'll do like the easy thing first, or actually let's start with the hard one. Like what if you can outline some of your like if you have some unique methods or prompt stuff that you think would be cool to share, assuming it's not like something you don't want to put out there, like what would it be? What's your sort of general artistic process of taking a song, getting your lyrics and getting it out onto Suno's page with millions of
Sure.
views? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any secret sauce I'm not willing to share.
Okay.
I definitely am not on the side of the proprietorship of like this is my thing. Like you know what I
Right.
mean? Like I'm the opposite where like I
Same.
want to learn from others. I want others to be inspired by me, whatever. Um,
Agreed. Agreed.
for me, I mean, I think songs start in a lot of different places for me. I think most often at this point, just because it's like it's a new tool and I'm still playing with it, and it's a way to like unblock yourself. I'm like a huge advocate for Remy as like a starting point, and for anyone who doesn't know, Remy is like the lyrics model inside of Suno. A lot of the time, I just find myself going into lyrics, doing the little magic wand icon, saying right lyrics, and literally just generating without even a topic in there,
Hmm.
and letting Remy just come up with something.
Oh,
And
cool. I didn't know you
it's
could even do
very
that.
rare that I'll just be like,
So
yeah,
you can do it
you
without
don't
any
input anything. You
prompts.
just
Ah, it's clever.
yes,
Okay,
right,
cool.
yeah, and it'll yeah, and it'll just like pick a random topic. Some of them are not at all good. Some of them are very funny, so whatever. But the thing I'm mostly looking for isn't like a fully constructed song.
Right,
It's like a
right.
line or two that inspires something for me, right? Like I think in general, and again, like on the side of artistry, it's like you need to be inspired and driven by something. And if that's just like one or two lines that Remy spits out at me, like awesome, like that, like unblocks me, that gets something going, inspires something.
Yeah.
So some of the time it's like a song will be like 80% Remy. Much more of the time it's closer to like 20% Remy because I'm going through and I'm chopping it apart and I'm like changing one word, then I'm making some drafts and then saying, oh, that line doesn't work as well as I thought it would, and I'm changing that,
Hmm.
right? Um, Other times will just be straight, like I think I maybe shared this like in Diskrot or some doc or something, but I like had a song idea like literally like shopping at Target like with my daughter, and literally like had to like jot down stuff in like the notepad, like just like the standard like inspiration strikes anywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
um but yeah, I mean like I said, more common at this point is like something starting with Remy. And then I have like a handful of like prompts that I use pretty commonly now as a starting point, but then I do a lot of like cover chaining beyond that. Like, if I do like a whatever, like lo-fi, experimental, emo, blah blah blah, and then do it, and it's like a little too rocky, and I want something a little more electronic, or vice versa, then you just kind of like start to steer it, use that, like you said, as conditioning, and go, all right, well now I'm gonna push it in a different direction, but I really like the melody and the idea that it's doing, um, and kind of just like trust your ear on it. I think is
Yeah.
like what I tend to do, like, and I'm definitely more of like a melody first kind of person. Like once I hear like a guitar line or like a even like a voice, like, oh, it did like a falsetto at this part I wasn't expecting. I kind of like latch onto that and I will try to like build around it to try to make sure it stays because I have now
Yeah.
fallen in love with that part or whatever.
So you try to
Um,
find a part of
and
it that
then
like captures your attention, and then you sort of construct out from there, or reconstruct rather.
yeah,
Do you do this
yeah.
mostly in studio, or you do mostly cover chaining these days? Because I know you've been working
So
a lot in studio.
yeah, it's funny because like I part of me wants to not work in studio as much because like I still think there's a lot of good stuff you can do without it. But
Yeah.
now that I like got the taste for it, I like can't not use studio vast majority of the time. Like it's just such a fun tool and it's so hard. Like once you hear like a little thing, it's much easier to be like, all right, well, I have to fix that one thing. Like before, you might be
Right.
like, oh, let it slide. It's good. Imperfection's nice, whatever. Now I'm like, I'm probably finishing in studio, but I think most of my process is still probably outside of studio. I do more of like I'll generate layers and I'll do different takes in there and I'll chop things up and rearrange them. But I'm still like generating the sort of foundation of that in like Suno proper or whatever.
Okay.
Before that, most of the time. But
So
yeah,
most
it
of the
definitely
time you're
varies a little
doing
bit.
your bass using basically traditional, I would say established workflows, at least in diskrot, cover chaining extensions, all the usual bits, and then when you're sort of getting towards the end, you're taking it to studio and then basically mastering it in essence. But in your case, I know you do a lot of layering and mixing, and that will be. You have videos about that we can put on this if people want to see it.
Oh yeah.
And okay, awesome. Okay, last thing, generally, do you have? What would you like if you were a if you could go back to yourself when you first started on Suno? If there's some sort of advice in terms of prompting or music creation that you think would jumpstart or help you get to where you are now, or faster and understand it better, is there some simple bit of advice you could give to someone who's new to creation on Suno?
Hmm. That's a good question. Yeah, 'cause I think the place my mind first went was because I was on Suno in like V2 or whatever, it was a very different way of like prompting, right? Like it would be a lot more general, you'd have a lot less characters to play with.
Yeah.
Now it's much more open-ended. I can speak in full sentences and like make references, like, the standard kind of agent conversation. Um, I think it's still important to experiment with different things, like even like prompting within the lyrics. I think is still actually pretty like interesting. Like there's still stuff you can do there. Like throwing beat switch in the middle of it and having that align with your prompt. I think just like even if it's not ultimately what you want to do, I think there's something like instructive there about like what is it gonna listen to and what isn't it,
Uh
as you kind
huh.
of play with it. So I think it's just like getting to know the tool, but also trying to find a few descriptors or inspirations that like elevate it or make it like more truly yours.
Uh huh.
Like I mentioned earlier, like I do like lo-fi a lot, or like I do emo a lot, and like it doesn't mean I want a lo-fi emo song. It's just that directionally there's some aesthetic there. Like I like the way that like emo voices emote, right? And so like
Yeah.
using that, or like raw and unpolished, like words like that are a lot more helpful directionally than like attached to a genre. And I think the other thing I'd recommend for new people is to like actually, now that it is a more open-ended prompt, like talk to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever about, hey, how would you describe this song that I really love, right? And see what it does. And then, I mean, you can just take that whole thing and port it over and be like, okay, and it might do something cool. But I think even more is just, again, like what you're learning about how something else frames that sound. Because I think a big challenge with this, with Suno and music in general, is just there isn't as much of a shared language. Like there's not like a lexicon beyond like general genre stuff, right? Like
Right.
if you ask someone to describe an artist, they're going to be like that pop one, right?
Yeah.
Like, or it's like it's catchy and it's light or whatever. But there's so many more descriptive words and directions that you can get if you like
Learn the
know what you're looking
vocabulary.
for. And
Yeah.
totally. So I think that would be the guidance is like build a vocabulary, build a lexicon, like
Yeah.
understand what those words do for the output. Yeah.
That makes sense. All right. Well, awesome. Well, it's been great talking to you. One last thing I always ask everyone: is there a artist that you would recommend people give a listen to? Not ideally not one of us or whatever, but it can be someone in diskrot if you're like off the top you can't think of someone. But if there's someone, and if you don't have anyone, that's also fine. But if there's an artist on Suno or I don't think you're going to pick a competing AI creation site, but wherever it is,
No.
if there's someone that you would recommend people give a listen to, you can shout them out, and I'll link them in the description here. But is there somebody you have?
Sure. Yeah,
Take your take.
I wish I thought more about this before. I'm going to use one that like anyone in the Discord knows that I'm obsessed with, but this is Soul,
Yep, I knew it was going to be Saul.
SOL.
Yeah, I knew it would be Saul. But I
I'm
wanted
such
to.
a
That's why.
fan.
Yeah. My wife loves Saul too. So that's why
Yeah,
he's not allowed in
very,
because
very good.
I'm very very no, I'm just kidding. I'm trying to get Saul in. I can't get in touch with them. I've tried. I've tried a couple times now. So they're enigmatic. It makes
Oh,
me
that's a
want.
shame.
Yeah, we got to get him in even more. But all right, I'll
Even
link
more,
Saul.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll link him. We'll get
Yeah.
him in eventually. Maybe someone will let him know that we were talking about them in this video. All right, Ian. Well, it was great meeting you, and I mean, we've spoken before, but it was awesome to hear more about your artistic background. Another of
Yeah.
a hugely diverse group of. What amazes me the most, just to end off here, is like how freaking like awesome all of you guys are, and I don't mean that to I mean literally like you guys are like lead designers, doctors, like senior software engineers. Like it's bizarre how this group of people are all making art like enormous amounts of art like I've never seen before constantly, while also having all these like I don't know, it just kind of blows my mind when I think about it a little bit because it's
Yeah.
definitely it's a coincidence, but I doubt it's a coincidence how interesting all of you guys are. So anyway, it was great talking to you, and
Yeah.
that's we'll conclude the interview. See ya.